Steve Young, dude, such a pleasure to meet you. We've just been talking a little off camera, man. How are you, brother?
I'm very well, thanks, Steve. It's great to meet you too. And we've been talking for a while, I guess, off camera and before on Telegram for a bit. Yeah, really appreciate everything you're doing, and it's appreciate you having me on your channel.
Yeah, man, I don't really have a show, so like I said, we're just gonna kind of talking. But usually I'm being interviewed, but I bring on a few people every once in a while who I think my subs would really like to hear from and have some interesting things to say. And I've read your book, so I don't like long bios, as I told you, but you're the author of A Fool's Wisdom, which I've read, and I actually bought it for the alchemy part because I heard such rave reviews, and I almost skipped the first half. Just because I'm reading like seven books at the same time. But I was like, nah, I'm gonna read the whole thing. And it's brilliant. The first half is amazing and it's funny as shit. And I learned just so much. And just for people listening, so I guess you denounced all this, but you do have like a master's of science, and you're actually a PhD in theoretical physics, right?
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, it seems like a lifetime ago now, but yeah, it would have been 21 years ago. I graduated from that, and yeah, I was driven to understand, how things work. I was drawn to physics and mathematics at an early age, and then pulled into the new physics, as it's called. The quantum and the relativity and all this, and then that became like the bulk of my undergraduate education, very mathematics heavy, and then into PhD, looking for a way to apply that. Well, the applications of quantum physics are nuclear physics, right? So then I did a PhD in nuclear physics, and again, all very theoretical, very technical, a lot of coding, that kind of thing. But then, yeah, came out with a PhD and, couldn't get a job, at least not one that was relevant to anything that I had learned at university. And, this was always a bit of a bugbear. I ended up working in IT consultancy, working mainly for banks, which is where most PhD physicists end up working. And yeah, so I was always interested in how much of what I learned at university is actually used in the world. There are people actually working with it and using these equations and these theories and doing stuff with them. And so I've had over 20 years to look the world and see that there's just absolutely nothing happening with any of this stuff. Like there seems to be no use for it, and the things that they claim that are the applications of this, the applications of quantum or the applications of relativity or whatever, are actually not. When I look closely at them, I came to understand that these are not applications, these are not proofs, and so yeah, there was this whole kind of de-indoctrination process that's been happening over the last 20 years. And a big part of that was coming to alchemy, which I started researching around about 10 years ago or more, actually, probably 12 years ago. And this was like it was a big, yeah, it was mind blowing, and really, really opened my mind to real natural science, like practical natural science that is also spiritual. And I came to this conclusion that alchemy is the true science, and that the true science is a spiritual science. And we've been fed this like shadow science, which is like only physical, only materialistic. Only the body, no soul, no spirit, no God, just bodies, and on rocks flying through space and all this kind of thing, right? And I've always found that a very unsatisfactory worldview. And I used to always think that they were looking for proof of spirit, or looking for proof of the soul, or looking for proof of God. But then as soon as I realized that, like, even if they found it, they wouldn't they wouldn't believe it. They'd chuck it away, because the whole thing is actually predicated on being godless and rejecting the spirit and rejecting the soul. So it's actually a type of religion that throws away all other religion, and instead like worships these idols like the atom and things like this. So
Yeah, which is quite funny. I saw Alex Zach talking to Brendan Murphy about the same thing. And you get the two choices. You get your religion, which can't handle any of the physical, or you get this shit, which is making up nonsense because both are trying to find this deeper thing, and neither can explain it, so people end up bouncing from one to the other. And really, to me, alchemy and the old ancient teachings, which really are coming out of Ireland, but the Hermetic and alchemical teachings, the old Freemasonic, PHRE, Irish, which means sun and spirit, this is the bridge between the two, and this is where both actually come from. So what I think is cool, because you're a PhD in this, and you did do, it's kind of like a liberal arts degree, you're saying it's useless. But just like with the virology, and it helped when we had like Dr. Kaufman, Dr. Cowan, Sam and Mark Bailey, Amanda Vollmer. When the doctors come out, because people are still indoctrinated to trust the lab coats, it helps, like, to me, when a person like you comes out and is saying, right, atomic theory, prove it, right? Relativity, prove it. Earth cosmology, flat Earth, round Earth. It gives some credit, because you're not like just a guy like me. You are a pro in this. You have a PhD.
Yeah.
So I think your book's like really important. Before we get into alchemy, which is cool, what kind of shit are you getting from your old like colleagues and former friends? You're like a heretic in the religious cult of scientism.
Mostly just tumbleweeds, eh? Yeah, but I mean, yeah, you're definitely on the other side of the fence when you start talking about this stuff, and a lot of people never speak to you again and all that. And yeah, it just comes with the territory now. And I think, like, going through the last like 4 years, kind of, it's like a Negredo, right? We were talking about alchemy, like the Negredo, like just going through like a really tough like ordeal, which breaks you down to your core essence and teaches you who you truly are, and you no longer give a crap what anyone else thinks. Well, that was kind of what it was like, through these recent years. And I felt, I've just got to tell my story. It's not enough to go and just like give people like a list of facts, just be like, this is false, this is real, this is false, this is real. It's like, because they can't, it just doesn't, that's not how people learn, right? It's like, but when you actually tell your story, tell your life story, and how you went from being a believer in one thing to not believing in that thing, and why, then it's more relatable, and it's more entertainment, and more entertaining, can be more funny and less sort of combative, so that was the kind of approach I wanted to take with it. But yeah, I mean, I haven't had any stick from the academic side of things yet. I mean, as I said in the book, I think they just ignore you, block you, and smear you, and don't really rise to the challenge most of the time. In fact, I had someone from Dundee University write to me today and invite me to go and give a talk there, as they're interested in healing academia and helping to take it back to truth. So I did not expect that. I thought I'll never be invited to a university ever again, after writing this. And then I got
that's
an invite
pretty
literally
cool,
today.
Well, this is a good segue in, because people would say, okay, well, what's the point of alchemy? Why should I learn the natural and spiritual science? And as you've just said, and what I like about your book is you give your own personal life story, which is kind of cool. And it's once you understand this and see that you're doing alchemy all the time, every day, and everything, and then there are certain things you're doing where you're not doing it correctly, and you could be doing it in a different order. It transforms you as a person. As you said, now you don't give a shit. Like you've gone through a 4-year, as a lot of us have the last 4 years. You can alchemically transform yourself to be a much better and much more productive person in everything you do. And, you wouldn't be wasting so much time and energy, playing the victim and belittling yourself and needing a false savior or another savior or a historical character to come back and save you, or whatever, or science to save you, right? I need the vaccine, Once you figure this out, it's like you become your own master, or at least this is the tool to transform yourself into your own master. What would you say is the benefit of people learning at least like basic alchemy?
Well, I honestly just get a huge amount of clarity from understanding the basic elements: fire, earth, air, and water. Because you know, I mean, this sounds so pompous to say it, but like, I feel like I really do understand how everything works now. And I might have said that when I got out of university. I'd be like, oh yeah, I understand how everything works, but my head was full of false theoretical explanations that didn't stand the test of time, right? And I started to realize that my explanations don't stand up. If I try explaining things to people in terms of quantum physics, their eyes glaze over. It's like they don't understand it. They don't get it. I don't get it either. We're just talking. It's like, what does any of this even mean? But when I really start to see the fire, the earth, the air, and the water, and how they operate in our realm, how everything works became very, very clear. And things such as free energy, for example, right, which is one thing they tell you in physics, like physics dogma: no such thing as free energy, no such thing as transmutation. You can't transmute metals one into another and all this. But when you understand fire, earth, air, and water, you realize it's totally abundant. Like, it's infinite. Energy is free. There's no shortage of fire. There's no shortage of air. There's no shortage of water, and no shortage of earth. They're literally abundant, infinite. You have as much resources you could possibly ever need, wherever you are. But when you don't have knowledge of the elements, you think that everything is scarce, right? You think, oh, you need systems, you need centralized systems, and you can't get your hands on things. But actually, everything is right there, super abundant, and can be transmuted and changed into something better.
So yes, yeah, and so there's a freedom. I see the same, like, one of the reasons I think they hide this from us, and they do know these in the Masonic lodges, same as we were talking off screen. Now you start to understand the real parables in the Bible. Instead of taking this stuff on a really simpleton surface level, once you understand what these metaphors are really talking about, you start to get Genesis, you start to get Adam and Eve. Like, how could a snake be talking to a woman? You're like, it's not. It's a story for a much higher and deeper meaning. And these could be applied to our sciences. Like you said, you had to get out of theoretical physics because you can't use it. So, but if we started applying this alchemical knowledge to the real, I shouldn't say the real sciences. If we replace the fake sciences we all have, the materialism sciences, we'd be doing stuff just so magnificent. And I think the ancients, what people are calling Tartarians, or the old, pre-tech civilizations, they knew this most certainly. I think they already had control of this. Yeah. So yeah, it's also useful. And the reason they hide that is, as you said, when you find out everything is abundant and you can transmute things into other things, which modern science says you can't. Well, now you don't need any of them. You don't need their oil and gas, and you don't have wars over gas and oil and minerals. You don't need them, But let's get into alchemy. So a lot of people think, well, alchemy is just a bunch of old dudes and beards sitting around in their labs trying to turn metals into gold, or find like the potion of youth, right, or everlasting life, or whatever, which we'll get into because I think I know what that is.
Yeah.
But so, right, is that a metaphor, or do you think they were really turning metals into gold, really literally, or do you think that's just only a deeper metaphor?
I think I think it is literally possible to turn lead into gold. I mean, the way I've read about it is, through the use of the Philosopher's Stone, which would be a case of like melting down the lead and then sprinkling in some of the stone, and then more fire, and then eventually letting it cool into something else. It would be a specific amount of fire, specific kind of fire. And all this, but the idea is purification. So like every process in alchemy is a different type of purification, and every time we're doing really anything, we're purifying, which is ultimately taking apart that which you want, that which you need, from that which you don't want, or it's a kind of separation. And you were talking about the scriptures. I mean, so one thing I noticed when I looked at the scriptures after coming to alchemy was all the miracles that Jesus did are all alchemical processes, right? It's like water into wine is fermentation, you find these actually these miracles are talking about alchemy, and so much. I mean, the realm, the nature of the realm and everything. The fire, earth, air, and the water. The Bible says that each of the elements have their own flesh. The birds are the flesh of the air, the fish are the flesh of the water, and the beasts are the flesh of the earth. And the implication is that man is the flesh of fire. Right? Man is like the light. We're like the flesh of light itself. So, yeah, coming at the Bible with the knowledge of alchemy was just like it was a whole other thing. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, let's do that because there's numbers play heavily into alchemy, and there's the one we could before we go into we could go into the tria prima or tria prima, but let's just start with the basics because the stuff we do every day, like cooking, I'm really into cooking. After I got divorced, my ex-wife cooked. She was like amazing, and then I was single, and I'm like, shit, I only know how to make cereal and toast. So I had to reinvent myself as well, and start learning like proper cooking. And I'm like, I'm not gonna eat crap. I actually sit like and watch Italian chefs and Michelin star chefs. And in your book, you made an example of even just making a cup of tea.
Yeah,
is alchemy. Anyone who drinks beer and wine like I do, I'm a musician. I'm drinking it. Fermentation, distillation. This is alchemy. So it's in our everyday life. How about if we start with the 7 steps of just regular alchemy, right? From calcination down to coagulation. Can we?
Sure. Yeah. Let's go through them.
Let's do this real basic because I'm a ghetto alchemist, and a lot of our people listening are going to be like, "What are you talking about?" So let's have you just keep this totally simple. Yeah. Let's just start with like calcination, roasting. What is the 7 steps and what is the point? And again, people need to understand these are literal for certain things. Mm-hmm. And they're metaphorical, right, for other things. So there are multiple layers of this, like the scriptures. You can take this literally, and you can also take this on a spiritual level and not a literal physical level. So walk us through the 7 steps, man. Yeah.
Sure, happily. So the first one, calcination. So each step, the first one corresponds with fire. It's an application of fire. So you think of all the ways you can apply fire. You can like heat things, you can roast them, you can dry them, irradiate them, and even like pulverizing, smashing stuff up and grinding it is a correspondence with fire because it's vibration, it's force and vibration, like to break something down. Fire is said to be the purest element, and that there's no impurities in fire itself, although you have impurities in the air, impurities in the water, and impurities in earth, and fire is able to purify them all. And so the first stage of alchemy is about the application of fire. Now, this can be something really simple, like in the case of making a cup of tea, it's the drying of the tea leaves. After you source them, you take the leaves from the plant, they need to be dried. So that is
crushed too, because then you would crush those leaves into the powder. Yeah. So that's the fire. And the fire, there's always a male and a female principle, right? Mm-hmm. I thought there were 72 genders, Steve. What's going on? Does it turn out there's really only 2? Yeah. So fire is a male principle, right? It's an action like sex. The male does this.
Fire is the male principle. The active principle as well is sometimes called, or the prime mover. It's the element that moves all the other elements. You can sort of think, the air, the water, and the earth wouldn't move at all if it wasn't being heated and irradiated and vibrated somehow.
So the fire and the air are the 2 male principles or active principles, and the wind's blowing, hurricanes, tornadoes. We see that. Yeah. And the water is a female. It's receptive. It always moves. You jump in the water and it moves around you and it moves things and changes. And the earth is also female receptive, right? Which we'll get into in the 4 principles. All right. So we're making tea. So we did calcination. That's the picking and the crushing and the drying of the leaves, right? Right. Then what comes next?
Okay. So the next is the application of water, which is called dissolution. And that is to dissolve something, take something dry and dissolve it in water to increase the purification of it some more. So When we put the tea bag in the water, the essences that we want, the flavors and essences that we want, are released into the water, and there's a stirring, a sort of spiraling and dissolving of that. And so that would be, in the case of tea, that would be the second step: dissolution, application of water. And then the third step, which is an air correspondence, called separation. And that is basically exactly what it says on the tin, right? That's just taking things and separating them. So in the case of a cup of tea, we're taking the tea bag out of the cup, right? It's like, that's the separation. We no longer need the tea bag, or the dried leaves is not part of the goal of what we're trying to create. So we remove the tea bags. That's our separation, and that's an air correspondence. If you think about it, you're separating them in the air, right? You're organizing things into different places. It's an airy application. And then the fourth is conjunction, which corresponds with earth, because that's when you like bring things together and join them together in conjunction. And so in the case of tea, that would be the milk, the sugar, and the tea you've just made, bringing them together, three things, stirring them, and then it becomes a new thing. You have now a cup of tea from 4 processes, and you've used all 4 elements in the making of the drink.
And that's the order always, right? Fire, air, water, earth.
Yeah,
we get into ether later. We'll get into the ether later, but
yeah. I mean, in general, the operations are independent and can be done in a variety of ways in different orders depending on what you're doing. But the order of the 7 steps relates to the creation of the Philosopher's Stone and all this. Yeah. It's like a particular process called the Great Arcanum.
Yeah. I think in your book you stopped the tea at 4. But I started thinking about 5, which was fermentation, which is, you said, digestion, death of matter, and release of spirit. Yes. Well, wouldn't 5 be you drinking the tea? And then that is the fermentation inside your digestion. Wouldn't that be 5?
That's brilliant. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. I thought of another way, which is kombucha. You ever drink kombucha?
I have, and I heard it, and I don't even know what the hell it is.
Fermented tea. So in kombucha, then you take the tea and you add this thing called a SCOBY, which sits in there and eats all the sugar and turns it to alcohol. But it's very, it's very mild. So a kombucha is typically only like 1 to 3% alcohol. But it's fizzy and it's, delicious. And yeah, it's like my favorite drink because it's like the best of like beer, juice, and tea, all like put together in one. It's a great thing. But so kombucha is made with fermentation. But yeah, obviously beer. That's how beer is made as well. So if you think you're making a kind of tea with the with the barley, when you're making whiskey, say for example, as well, you're making a kind of tea. You're washing it. You're going through a dissolution. You're separating it out. And then you're putting in a starter, which initiates the fermentation. So this is the 5th stage of alchemy. And yeah, it's called death and rebirth because there's a breakdown of organic material, which in this case is sugar. And there's the production of spirit, which is alcohol. And so the living material is dying and spirit is being produced, right? So it's death and rebirth. And fermentation is what makes the money with all these drinks and everything, right? Whiskey and vodka and all that. It's like actually how long it's fermented and how purified it is afterwards is what the art of brewing is.
That's why they're called spirits.
Yeah.
But you hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's called spirits because you drink it and it opens you up to the demons coming in." You're like, no.
Yeah.
It's called spirits.
I think it's actually really sensitive to what we put into it, is the thing. I mean, we know this with water, for example. We've seen all the various studies that show how our intention affects water. Well, spirit is more volatile than water. It's like much more volatile, and I therefore believe that it's far more susceptible to the energy you put into it. So if you're drinking in a bad mood or you're depressed and you're in bad company, then you're sort of poisoning the spirit in a way, and then you're putting that into your body, and it can obviously take you to a dark place. But
That's
usually,
like Vita Austin, when she's putting this intention into these water and then freezing them, and then that's really kind of almost injecting a spirit directly in. But you see it at bars. I'm a pub musician. There's what we call angry drunks who can't handle their whiskey. And then there's happy drunks who could drink it all night long. And I think it's exactly what you're saying. If you're happy and you're drinking out, having a good time, you're a happy drunk. If you're pissed off there drinking because you're drinking your sorrows away, or sitting home alone pounding shit to, you're gonna have a good time or a really bad time. But I think it's important. So it's the death of matter, and that is like what's going on when they ferment in a brewery. Then when that spirit releases, don't they capture that again through another pipe and try to catch that spirit again, like condense it?
Yeah. So in the sixth process of distillation, the output from fermentation is put into a distiller where it's heated gently, and then the least dense or most subtle spiritual essences in there will evaporate first. They'll go up the neck of the distiller, and then they're sort of captured and cooled and put down another neck and into another container. And that spirit that's collected can actually be reintroduced into the distiller as many times as you like, and keep on purifying and taking away the most subtle essences and bringing them out and putting them back in, and then splitting those. It's like you're getting like finer and finer sort of densities, But I was thinking the other day with spirit, it's interesting because we call it spirit, right? And what does spirit mean? Well, spirit doesn't have a body. Right? It's a spirit. And you can't actually dry alcohol. There's no such thing as alcoholic salt. You can't make salt out of alcohol because it has no body, right? It's purely a spirit. Whereas sugar, you can make into a salt, right? Sugar has a body. So in the fermentation process, the sugar, the body gets killed and produces spirit. But spirit is completely spiritual. It's liquid and air, but it has no earth. It has no earth in it. Yeah.
Is that like would you call the gases almost spirits as gas? Or is that still physical?
That's what happens when you leave the lid off of a bottle of whiskey, right? It just all returns to the air. Eventually, it just goes back to the air. So it's it's like it is spirits from the air, but it's been condensed and collected into this liquid form.
So it's like that would be the last coagulation, right? But it's like you can get a lot of spirit into you can get more, you can get a lot of it, condense it into this, and then have all of that purified so that this much is the same as is that kind of what you're like, condensing a lot of spirit into a really power packed?
Yeah, well, in the case of we'll talk about the seventh step now, which is coagulation, which is the process of a spirit coming into body. So coagulation is something that's not physical coming into being physical, like crystallization, for example, is a type of coagulation. And so in the case of whiskey, let's say, I would say that coagulation corresponds to the aging process. So after the spirit has been collected, it's put in barrels and it's left for, years or decades. Now, I'm into whiskey. I was never into it before, but I started getting into it in my 40s, funnily enough. I'm like, I really appreciate this now,
How dare you, man? You're Scottish. You should be drinking scotch, not whiskey.
I just never got into it when I was younger. I wasn't that big drinker in my 30s either, but then I got back. Yeah, I got into whiskey in my 40s. It's good stuff, and it's basically the most pure thing you can buy in this store. It's gone through seven steps of alchemy, like very well. There's distilleries all over the country, and they take their work extremely seriously. But so during the time when the spirit is in the caskets or the oak barrels, like it's taking on the qualities of the place that it's in and of the time period that it's in as well. And this is why whiskeys can be so expensive sometimes if they're really old. It's like because the spirit has taken on those years, like into itself, and that manifests in some kind of character or effect. So so when it's basically in the casket and then it's bottled, that would be the coagulation, because if it wasn't in the casket and it wasn't bottled, it would all just go back to the air, and there would be there'd be nothing to drink, right? So, yeah.
I like when it also kind of takes on the flavor of the, they're like whatever kind of wood barrel you had it in. It also kind of coagulates with some of that too, and takes on, which is the same when you cook and eat food. To me, it sounds like the last 3 steps of the alchemy are what happened to the food in your body: digestion with the acids, the mixing. Another process goes, then it releases the enzymes, or chi, or prana as they call it sometimes, which is spirit, right? And then your body uses that chi or prana or spirit or enzymes in coagulation to make body parts or whatever it needs to do. That's kind of it. So that would get us, that's the 7. So maybe we should go to let's go to the 5, but really there's 4. So that would bring us to like, we see these 4 colors everywhere: black, white, yellow, red. And then we see these pentagrams everywhere, which are satanic, and they're not. And really they're both the same thing, aren't they? Except because in the pentagram, ether and air would be separated, but in the fold principle, ether and air would be interchangeable, right? But let's start with can we start with like, what is like black, carbon, white, silver, gold, albedo, citronus? Can we go through the 4, or is it better to start with the
yeah, no, I think that's
4 elements?
Yeah, because you have these, what they call the 4 stages of the work. So there's the 7 processes, which correspond and go back to the 7 luminaries and the 7 chakras, and it's all related to that stuff as well. And there's the 4 elements, but there's also these 4 stages. Yeah, Pink Floyd, man, and after my own heart. Oh yeah, and the 7 colors, there they are. Yeah, 7 notes of the musical scale and all that. The 7 is throughout all of this, and obviously a big number in like spiritual science and everything. Coming back to the 4 stages of the work. So they're each assigned colors like black, white, yellow, and red. And sometimes it's just black, white, and red. The yellow one is dropped out a lot. And when I started writing the book, I was under the impression there's 3 stages of the work, right? Black, white, and red, because that's what I'd read about. That's what I'd heard. And then I started digging and hearing about this yellowing stage, the citronatus, and actually that it all made more sense when I learned about that. So, the blackness stage is called the negredo, which means the blackening. And in a physical alchemy sense, this is just the burning of material, or the heating or roasting of material, which, as we know, reduces it to a black ash eventually. But if you keep going with the heat, it eventually becomes white, right? There's a white ash that comes like further down the line. So we have this first step is like the blackening, and it's a purification as well. So when you burn something, it's the impurities and subtle essences like that burn away, and what's left, that black ash that's left, is like the essential salt of the substance. It's the unburnt, right? It's the part of the thing that couldn't be burnt away. Right?
This is kind of like just throwing garbage in a fire pit, and eventually, the ash is fine. Whatever crap was in the garbage, by the end, the ash is harmless. It's just carbon, right? Isn't carbon?
It'll have a use. Yeah, it'll be useful. It'll be purified. And all this garbage will be gone. Yeah, back to the air.
And that's nigredo, is the blackening. And then you said in your book that's associated with fire and destruction of the old. So even metaphorically, this is when it's ready to change. This is the saying, isn't it? When you want to change and you don't do anything, and someone says, "Hey, we need to light a fire up this guy's ass," or something like that. Wouldn't that be like the metaphorical nagredo or whatever? You need to light a fire up your ass to get things moving, so change happens.
Yeah, and so there's Ordeal of Fire as well, which can, it can involve literally dealing with fire. Of course, like if you say like wildfires or a house fire or something, that would be an Ordeal of Fire. But Psychologically, like an ordeal of fire is, when you're like under attack, maybe being scorned or, criticized or accused, or, when like, every when the world apparently turns against you, as it did, in recent years, like, and you're just getting a lot of abuse, and you're getting shaken up. You're getting shaken to the core. It can be, that's like an ordeal of fire. You're being tested. Your willpower is being tested. Your metal is being tested. Right. That's like a Negredo as well, of the psychological sort. So the Negredo symbolizes the breakdown of the ego, which they talk about as being all the like impure thoughts that are like surrounding your soul, just things that you pick up, things that you believe or you've been told about or whatever, or fantasies or whatever it is. They're all like kind of floating around your soul. But when you go through an ordeal of fire, it really just blows all that stuff away, and then you're left as like the charred carbon salt, your essential self. So yeah, the Negredo, yeah, we've definitely been through those. And when you put yourself through a purifying ordeal as well, like I was doing this a lot in Central America, like doing like ayahuasca ceremonies or temazcal and things like this. Temazcal is like a sweat lodge type thing. They've got heat, they got fire, and they got drums, bam bam bam, which is also fire. Like sound is fire in an alchemical sense. So and they're chanting, and there's just lots of volume and vibration and heat, and you undergo a lot of purification. You let a lot of things go in those processes. And the idea is, if you actually submit yourself to those kind of things willingly, then you're purifying yourself and you're making progress. But if you don't do that, then toxins will build up, and then nature will conspire to force a purifying ordeal onto you, and it'll probably be much worse. It'll be like some long sickness or whatever. Like, damn, if I just went and did the temazcal, I wouldn't have had this. But now I've got to do it the hard way.
Well, that's really no different than your fever and your flu. When you're over toxic and you get your flu, that fever and the shaking is to burn it out and squeeze it out of the tissue through the liquid, which would be probably the next stage of the whitening. But it's the same thing, and then people go and take their aspirin or Tamiflu and try to stop the fever, which is trying to help you, thinking that the fever is the enemy.
Yeah.
Like if your house was on fire, you need to put it out with some water or whatever, so it's like people are fighting the wrong enemy. So then that goes into silver or white, right? Which is the albedo, the white.
The albedo, so the whitening. So this is where, as I say, like you keep heating ashes, they eventually turn white, like a fine sort of powder, which I think the alchemists used to call like potash, where we get the word potassium from that as well. And they had all kinds of applications for potash, but so you can dissolve that in water and purify it like even more through dissolving in water, evaporating the water off, crystallizing, and you can end up, from what was a black ash, you can end up with a white crystal through that process, right? So it's another level up now. It's gone from the black ash to the white crystal, and this is called the albedo. And psychologically, this is like an influx of new information. So with the Negredo, you've had yourself broken down, you've had all the false information like flushed away, and the albedo is like, okay, it's like the light, it's like the white light now shining, and the new information, and filling you up again, as it were. So with the black is associated with carbon, and the white is associated with silver, or the moon, or the lunar principle.
Yeah, silver's the moon, the white light of the moon. That's feminine.
Yeah.
So that's all synonymous with each other.
Yeah. And the moon is also like a light in the darkness. Unlike the sun, which is a light in the daytime.
Yeah.
It's a light in the dark, because the moon doesn't actually light the sky. Yeah, it's another thing. The sky's completely black. The moon is light, but when the sun lights, the sky's lit up. It's so it's a weird kind of light. But yeah, so we have the sun, the moon corresponding with silver, and with the albedo, the second stage of the work. Now, the third and fourth stage, the yellow and red. The yellowing is associated with masculine energy. So this is, associated with sulfur and gold. Yellow is the color of sulfur and gold, and also the color of lions. And it is associated with like the strength of the lion, the energy in matter, because sulfur is a very energetic material. It's a component. It's a key component in digestion. Sulfuric acid, like breaking things down, explosives. So sulfur is super fiery, and I call it soul fire because it corresponds with the soul as well.
And soul's the Latin name for the sun, which is yellow, masculine energy.
Right, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, and it's like the sun's energy in matter, and the sun is masculine, as we talked about. We'll get to that later. But so the sun's associated with masculinity, the king of the sky, and the moon with femininity, the queen of the sky. So yeah, this is a symbol of having brought a masculine energy into the substance that you're transforming. And then with the reddening, well, the red is said to be the color of the Philosopher's Stone. In alchemical art, they often depict it as a red stone or a ruby red crystal or something like that. And that's said to represent the perfect balance of masculine and feminine. So you got your feminine coming in with the lunar, you got your masculine coming in with the yellow, and then when the right balance is achieved, there's a redness that then forms. That's that's how it's described.
That's kind of almost just reminds me of like red clay. God makes Adam from the rib, but the clay of the earth. It's
earth, yeah.
So that's like the fire, the air, the water, all condensing into earth. Almost like that would. The final product is physicality, really, you could call it, right? The Philosopher's Stone would be life breathed into matter, pretty much.
Yeah, spirit into matter with the perfect balance of masculine and feminine energies. Yeah, that's what it sort of symbolizes, having achieved a balance.
So you're saying if you call yourself they, them, zay, z, zi, z, they are not in perfect balance. Are you saying they might be a little bit out of balance? I'm just kidding you. Yeah. But something might be wrong there.
Yeah. And I mean that, like, the third and fourth stages are certainly more mysterious, to understand. I think the first two more easy to grasp. In fact, that's how I structured the book like that way deliberately. So the first half of the book is in Negredo, and the second half is in Albedo, right? So the first half is about breaking down all the all the old shit, right? It's like you said, destroying the old. And then the second half is like positive information, which is showing you what alchemy is and how it works.
Wow, I didn't even notice that, man. Yeah, shit. It's one of them books. I'm gonna reread it again.
All destructive, like it's like breaking things down, and then the first half is like the second half is building them up. Yeah.
Well, again, like it's a powerful read. So it's like, I didn't even notice you did that. But again, this is an example of how you can apply this to everything you're doing, like writing a book. And if you had structured it the other way around, perhaps it wouldn't be as powerful as if you did what you did and followed the natural method, which is true. Because I think if you start reading about alchemy and then go into the other way, you'd be like, what the hell is this guy talking about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like the first half is like the dark woods, you know what I mean? Like people are going to get like really triggered. There's going to be like lots of monsters that are going to like challenge them. A lot of people are going to chuck the book away and like curse me and like not want, there's a lot that people are going to get triggered about in the first half. But if they make it through, if they keep going, then I'm like saying, get to the second half. There's all this wonderful, like practical spiritual science that, you can really use, you can really work with. You got to suffer the breakdown of scientism in the first part.
Well, to be honest, it's got the citronatus in there too, because it's got the masculine, it's got your personal story in there, and it's got your humor, as you plugged your funny shit in there, and it's got your story of rebellion, which is a very masculine thing, the fight, the charge. So I would argue your book has that thrown in there as well, weaved in between the two, which would be the third stage. You know,
Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
so
hadn't thought of that. That's really interesting. Yeah, because it's not just about science and alchemy; it's also about the man, the man who wrote the book. Yeah,
yeah, the man who wrote
blind
the
spot. You know, I don't see that, but
book.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if you want to go. We'll get into the Philosopher's Stone and Philosopher's Stone later. Um, but let's talk about like physical alchemy for a second. You hear about like they have their lab, their forge, and their crucible. There's these trios or triangles you see a lot.
yeah.
So and then there's what's called mercury, salt, and sulfur.
Hmm.
But it's not really exactly mercury, the metal. There's a metaphor, and it is that, and it's not really
Hmm.
sulfur, but there is a metaphor, right? So when you hear about this, the principle of three, which is salt, mercury, and sulfur, and then later we'll get into the tria prima or tria prima. How do you
Hmm.
pronounce that for real?
Yeah, tria prima. I think. Yeah, I mean that is what you're talking about there. The salt, sulfur, mercury. But yeah, they're like principles that are echoed in many different areas of study as well.
Right.
This
Or
like
should we do the other four first, which is fire, fire, air, water, and earth?
well, I mean, I talked about those a bit already, but we can go into them in a bit more depth if you'd prefer.
Yeah, I don't know if it's better to. I would love to. Yeah, and I don't know if it's better to go to them first, or if you want to go to the trio and then back to the fours, because
Well,
there's always these four, threes, and twos, and then the
yeah,
sevens,
the four is
and
a
then
three.
there's the five, which is the seven musical notes plus the five black keys, which is the ether and the four elements, gives you the 12 within the octave.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they're in there too, but I don't
You've
want
got
to
the
lose
five
people.
planets as well. Yeah, the five visible planets. You know, because technically the sun and the moon are not really planets, although they are sometimes called planets as well. But they're obviously very different from the others. Uh,
Yeah. But let's say what is mercury, salt, and sulfur? What is that synonymous with?
Yeah, so this is where it gets more subtle and definitely harder to comprehend. And I spent a lot of time researching the elements and the processes before I really started to understand the three principles, or the tria prima. Um, Very mysterious. Mercury is super mysterious, and you know it's obviously one of the occulted metals that they don't want us playing with or knowing about. Yeah, they seem to use it for dastardly things like tooth fillings and injections. But they're like, oh, you can't touch it; it's too dangerous. You know, you'll go mad and all this kind of stuff. And you've got, of course, Mercury the metal, Mercury the planet, Mercury the Roman god, and then now you've got this fourth Mercury, which is this principle in alchemy. So there's like kind of four meanings to the word Mercury. Um, but broadly, it's about the mind. It's like the principle of the mind, the principle of liquidity and fluidity, and this like perfect balance of opposite properties. So Mercury is I would say it's a liquid, but it's not wet. It's like water, but it's metal. It's conductive. It's like it has masculine and feminine energies balanced within it, and it's considered hermaphroditic. It's like a hermaphrodite material because it has the perfect balance of masculine and feminine properties.
So it's a total. I want to show you this from a Freemasonic. I'm going to share my screen in a second here. Hold on. So here's a Freemasonic painting. You got the sun and the moon on the two pillars, and then there's the planets on the top, right? So you got your five planets as you just talked about,
Yeah.
and you got your sun and your moon on the pillars. Well, here's the symbol for Mercury, the glyph.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the moon, the feminine moon mind,
Yeah.
the sun, the masculine sun, soul, the mind and the soul. And then they sit atop the earth, their body, as you just said. Mercury is the perfect balance of masculine and feminine. And lo and behold, it's the glyph for Mercury,
Yeah.
which is called quicksilver, which is also the other name for your cerebral spinal fluid, which rises up through Kundalini practice or meditation
Oh,
and opens up your dormant brain cells and ignites the pineal gland, right?
yeah.
I mean, this is not a coincidence. This is science, all of this. But I just thought people might find that fascinating. When we see these glyphs, we're like, well, what is that? How do I stop sharing? There we go. Yeah, people are like, well, what are these symbols? They have very specific alchemical meanings.
Yes, the symbols are deep. You could talk about just them for, I mean, there's so much in the symbols. Like I believe they're like just as ancient as can be. They go way back to the beginning of everything.
Yeah.
We talk about the fire and air as they have the upward triangle because they
Yeah,
move up.
let's get into that. Save that because I'm going to show
Yeah,
that picture out of your book because
gotcha.
it's what people are calling the Star of David or the Seal of Soul of Man or Solomon,
Yeah,
the Israeli flag of the Jews.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I'd like to show people where that really comes from, that symbol. But let's get to that after. So then the salt.
Talking
So we
about
had Mercury. What does the salt symbolize?
So salt is the feminine principle and symbolizes the body. So salt is coarse, dry matter. It's salt is um, able to preserve things. It's a preservative, and it's able to absorb things as well, absorb moisture.
We know that with pickling because you can either pickle with vinegar or you can pickle with salt water. It still will preserve your food.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
or like when you're making salted beef, if you cure beef jerky, you just salt the meat, dry it out with fire. There's another alchemical process, and that shit'll last, like they say, 50 years, like a jerky will last forever. Yeah. So salt is the feminine, and so is earth. Earth is a feminine when we get to those triangle glyphs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Earth's feminine. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and it's just more broadly, it symbolizes like, coarse, dry matter, so we were kind of educated in the atomic, way to think that salt is like sodium chloride or something like that, right? But obviously salt is something extremely general. There's many types of salts. And it really just refers to that dry, coarse matter that's like sort of receptive and, has this property of like preserving and persevering. It's also the fixed principle.
Well, that's funny because I'm going to read you from the Philosopher's Stone later. This book is called The Zodiac and the Salts of Salvation. It's about the mineral tissue salts or cell salts that give you everlasting life if you have pure blood. And they're different. Yeah, they're potassiums and phosphates, and they're the different kinds. They are salts in a way, but they're not all table salt. They're different, People hear salt and they're like, "You mean like what I put on my breakfast?" You're like, no, that's one of them, but that's only one kind out of many of them. But funny enough, preservation, and they're called the salts of salvation. Once they run out, you die. You are no longer preserved.
That's it. Yeah. And salt is a type of earth, it's it's earthy. Obviously, we get it from rocks and things like that as well. And whereas mercury is fluid, but it's also metal. So mercury has it's like the water that doesn't wet the hands, but it is very watery and also earthy as well. But it has this energetic component too. So that's why you say you got the three: you got the moon, the sun, and the cross, which is the spirit, the soul, and the body all together, right?
Right. It's funny because in the Bible, Jesus or Yesa, the son, says to Peter, which the word Petra means stone.
Stone, yeah.
Or mineral, salt, stone. Jesus says Spirit says, on you, Peter, I will build my church. On you, salt, earth.
Yeah.
I will build my church, meaning the pyramid from the earth, the water, wind, fire. Like, this stuff syncretizes so massive, man. It
does, yeah.
So salt was feminine. So obviously sulfur is the masculine, then that Mercury balances, right?
Yeah. And it corresponds with the soul, as I say, soul fire. So, sulfur, soul, Mercury, spirit, salt, body. So you've got this threefold structure of man, body, soul, and spirit. So salt, sulfur, and Mercury.
And El Sol, the soul fire in the sky. That's the soul is why the Latins call it soul.
Fire, it's solar. It comes from the sun. And what I realized was that actually, alchemists long ago didn't have the word energy. They didn't use the word energy, right? They used sulfur. That's what they said instead, right? It's sulfur is symbolic of, the energy in matter.
That's where people get this confused. They think they're talking about stinky asshole sulfur. It's a metaphor too. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is the sulfur, the material, which obviously has a great power in itself. But then there's also just this kind of like masculine, like energy in matter, which it's more generally talking about. We're talking about energy, so it's almost like an old term for energy. So you have like from sulfur you get energy, from salt you get like structure and fixity, because salt is a crystal. Sulfur isn't a crystal, it's a very what would the word be, like caustic substance, it burns, right?
Yeah, well, it's good. It's good in chemistry because it produces incredible heat, doesn't it? And
yeah. So and what's interesting about those three, if we just talk about the actual physical materials themselves, is that alchemists say that that's how you make metal, is by actually mixing salt, sulfur, and mercury together. So that means that mercury is like the seed of all metals. Like any metal can be made by getting mercury, adding salt and sulfur, and doing some chemistry, like mixing it, heating it, and you can make metals of any properties that you want. And there's actually good reason to believe that all metals come from mercury, and it is the fact that all metals dissolve in mercury. So you can get like a big chunk of gold, put it in mercury, it'll just dissolve, like in water or whatever. So so all metals actually, except for iron, which is interestingly, but all metals dissolve in mercury except for iron. So they say all things dissolve into that from which they came, right? So if
that's interesting because iron takes on the air. Iron's one of the few metals that rust. It will absorb the air principle, actually. And
yeah.
So that's quite interesting, actually.
And iron corresponds with Mars. So there's that aspect to it as well. Weapons of war, right? The god of war, and iron is the metal of war. What all the war machines and the bullets and everything are like made from, and defensive structures, and So you find that. So for each of the 7 steps, they have a corresponding metal, and it's really interesting when you start. It's interesting when you focus in on one metal and look at all the ways that metal functions in the world. It sort of tells you like how, what it is and what it's used for. That kind of tells you like the character of the metal, like the alchemical like function of it. So you have copper, let's say copper and iron. We have, iron is Mars, the god of war, masculine, aggression, like principle, as I say, like weapons, and so on. And then you have Venus, which is copper, and this is the goddess of beauty and fertility. And copper is a very beautiful metal to like handle and like move. It's very malleable,
like water, like feminine water. It's soft and malleable.
It feels great. It feels like touching another person's skin almost, because it heats up to the temperature of your skin. It's so conductive and malleable, and it'll take any shape you give it. Anything you do to it, it will remember what you did. It's just amazing. Copper is absolutely extraordinary, and it's so cheap compared to gold and silver, but it's remarkable and has so much function. And of course, we think that what is copper doing in the world mainly? Well, it's connecting us, isn't it? It's actually connecting people through wires.
Well, we need it in our brain too. That's one of the reasons a lot of people get fucked. They don't have enough copper in their brains in their diet. They got shitloads of iron shavings and shit, but they don't have enough copper. It's supposed to be 80-20 copper, which is the connectivity for all the nervous system in the brain and all that stuff. So, it's crazy how this stuff syncretizes.
Yeah. And
this knowledge is
iron and copper in the blood as well. Yeah. And copper in the skin and everything. Yeah. And so, and they go back, I say, to these like god and goddesses, like the masculine and feminine, which are, they're like archetypes, god of war and goddess of beauty. and fertility. It's like destruction and creation, masculine and feminine. And it's really interesting to see how iron and copper actually play out, in our lives. It's very interesting.
Copernicus.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that one.
I think I'm of the opinion that most of these historical people are made up by the Roman Catholic Church, but that's another story. I don't think these people are real.
Right, man. Yeah, I mean,
I don't think they're real. Napoleon is Apollyon, the sun. Like, Plato, Pluto. As you go through this, it just seems like it's a total mind stroke.
Yeah, well, this is it. Pious fraud, right? This is the idea that they write things into history, fraudulent events and documents, and they date them. They use alchemy to actually date the documents to make them look like they were written hundreds of years ago and stuff.
Yeah, so that they look like they're the descendants and bloodlines and have like. I'm pretty sure they've been doing that. I don't trust a damn thing I read in a history book ever. But that's fascinating. So yeah, let's get now. These are what are brilliant. I've got can I show some of your book here? Because it's these I'm interested in here.
Yes.
So what do I got? We got fire. Okay, yeah, it's backwards for me. So there's the glyph for fire, and we've all seen this triangle, right? With the upward. Now that's a phallus, right? Isn't that your obelisk, the pyramid, the obelisk? That's
yeah. So
fire is like a male. It's a male principle.
Yeah.
Right. I'll hold this
upward as well. So you've got it's the male principle, so it looks like a phallus.
Yeah.
And the air and the fire both are upward pointing triangles because they both move up, and they're both above us as well. Like, because the fire is really, they're talking about the sun and the stars, right? That's the source of light.
So down here's the ground. They're actually like arrows pointing up, showing, "Hey, dummy."
Yeah. Yeah, look up.
And they're also phallic, yeah. And then what are these lines here? Do you know what these represent?
Well, so I just found those online, which was just, I guess, an artist made up those symbols, alternative symbols for fire. But it shows you a nice way because you can really relate to them. Like the symbol above fire looks like heat coming off of something, right?
Yeah,
like
it does.
A hot pie or something. Yeah.
I think that thing's on my conduction oven. Actually, I think that's the symbol of my oven.
And then the one with air, it's like you got these different layers. Like air sort of is like separated into these like different strata, that they call atmospheric layers or whatever, different stratas of different densities. And then you've got earth, which earth and water being the feminine elements, they have downward pointing triangle, which is a womb. And also they're down, they move down, like water pours down, earth falls down, and they're both below our feet. Generally speaking, the water and the earth are always beneath us.
Right. And so the receptive feminine, which is why the opening is on the top.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're showing you like the phallus and the vagina. These are the feminine principles. I won't even get into the gematria of the letter M over that, but like that's I could go on for a long time about that symbol there. But now why do they have the lines in the middle? Do you know why these two are aligned? Is that just to differentiate from these two?
It could be to do with the horizon line,
right?
Just where the air and the earth meet, as it were, or where the air and the water meet. But I don't know exactly the reason for the line, other than to distinguish them.
That could be because that's a special layer, isn't it? That Ross and I were talking about that the other Spacebuster, my best friend. Yeah. There's something I think on the very top of seawater. Mm-hmm. There's pure water at the level where the air hits the water. It's not salt water. It's pure.
Right.
There's something very special creatively going on where air hits water.
Yeah. It's a very special layer, that surface layer. And that is actually, it says in the beginning of Genesis that's where God came from, right? It's like the surface of the waters. The Spirit of God moved in the surface of the waters.
Right.
It moved in the deep. It doesn't say the Spirit of God moved in the deep waters or in the air. It says in the surface. So it's like the specialized state of matter.
Right. So that's where the energy, the male energy infuses with the female energy and creates life or animates it animates matter.
Yeah, and it functions like an antenna as well. Water is effectively an antenna of infinite bandwidth. Because if you if you get like just a regular antenna, like just a like an aerial, just a piece of metal, it picks up frequencies, but it resonates at the frequency of the length of the wire. And so it'll pick up frequencies at that length, at that wavelength. It'll pick them up really well, but frequencies that are away from that wavelength, it won't pick them up so well. So it's tuned by the length of the aerial. But water is able to receive all frequencies of vibration, all information. We know it can hold information in its interior structure and everything.
Oh, Vita Austin has proved that completely. Like that's what's going on. I don't even think DNA works like we're told. I think it's the water. Actually, I don't think it has anything to do with DNA.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and I know a lot of medical guys coming out with that same idea, saying that it's not like your cells and everything. Your cells is water because it's like a structured water, like like gel, right? Like water can make itself into a gel or like Jello, and the cells. Yeah, Tom Cowan was talking about how isn't even a cell membrane. It's just water, right? It's just water that's more dense than the water around it, kind of thing. Just like with Jello, there's not a membrane on the jelly. It's just it's just it's just like a denser kind of water.
Yeah, it's quite funny because what I like, a lot of people don't know these circle caps that the Jews wear. Mm-hmm. That's Roman Catholic. It's not Jewish. That's Roman Catholic, and that's the monad. It's the symbol for the circle. And they don't even know it. Modern Jews don't understand that that's Roman Catholic, which is coming from the Irish Hebers, the Hebers and the Udes in ancient Ireland 5,000, 6,000 years ago. And then they say, oh, well, the Star of David, or that the symbol on the Israeli flag. Oh, they say that's the seal of Solomon, which is the soul of man, the temple of the soul of man, built without sound or hammer, which is this. And what that is when you combine those four symbols, as you've drawn here somewhere. I can't see. You see them? Yeah.
Yeah.
When you put those four symbols we just talked about together, you get the seal of Solomon, the soul of man. You get all four of those converging into this.
And that's the symbol for ether.
Is that the etheric symbol? Yeah.
Yeah. So and then it's a perfect balance of the masculine and feminine elements, and sort of the root of all the elements, like the sum of the elements, or the origin of the elements. And it speaks to a romantic view of the cosmos as well, because we have this Father Sky, which is the air and the fire, and Mother Earth, which is the water and the air, and they're making love, and we are the product of that love making. It's beautiful, and I think it's a beautiful picture of the universe, and
well, that's interesting too, because Go ahead. Go ahead.
I bring life back into science. It's like, like that we all have a common mother and a common father and everything. So it joins, science and religion together in a beautiful way that I don't think really requires any faith at all. I think it's just like.
And fire is light, really, right? Like fire doesn't have to be fire like we think of fire. It's light.
Light, yeah.
Light.
Yeah.
So if you take the ether, which has both of masculine and feminine, which will get us into the duad later, in a bit, the two. When they say man's created in God's image, and you look at the ether as the creating primal force of all of this, we got 5 fingers, 5 toes, 5 this. We've got Allah. When you take was it Da Vinci who drew Vesuvius Man? The guy standing with his legs spread. Arm, leg, arm, head. ALLAH. Allah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's us. We are like the highest form created in the image. You know what I'm saying?
I was thinking as well with the Al, because you have the Al-Chem right? And then in chemistry, they just dropped the al and they took just the chem and ran with it because the al was the spiritual part of the whole thing. They were like, we don't want that spiritual nonsense in here, so we're just going to do chemistry, right? But I realized that the al is also with white, right? It's like chem means black, and al means white in a way because it's all. Al is all, and white is all frequencies. White noise is all frequencies of sound. White light is all frequencies of light. And the whitening is called the albedo, right? The albedo or the albino or whatever. So alchem is like white and black, right?
That kind of reminds me of yin and yang. They're white and black. And then when you look at the Korean and some of the Asian yin and yangs, they're red and blue with a white and black circle in the middle. But instead of black and white, they're red and blue, which is red shift, blue shift in a toroidal field. The black and white dielectric plane and still white magnetic split into the 7 colors and lights with a red shift, blue shift. You know what I mean? It's all there. I want to show you something really funky real quick too. Hold on. So David Icke, and I love a lot of his work. It's fantastic. But he talks about the Saturn moon matrix. Can you see my screen okay? I'll move us up. When we talked about the planets, the 5 planets and then the sun and the moon, the 7 principles, well, the Freemasons call the sky the Royal Arch. That's called the Royal Arch of Freemasonry. They're talking about the vault in the sky, the firmament. And the archons or the lights are the sun, moon, and the 5 planets. And you had these in this order in your book: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and Moon corresponding to the chakras. You had them in this order. And you had a section on where these were in this order. And Saturn is Chronos, right? The keeper of time. That's the crown chakra.
Yeah, there's definitely been some. I mean, when you start looking at these correspondences, there's a lot of different systems that are in use. Now, I always went with Saturn as the root, but I mean, you're right that Kronos is the crown. And I've even wondered that if different humans have different orders of chakras, which is a crazy thing to think, but because I've seen so many different systems, I'm like, either like people are getting it wrong, or maybe there are different systems in different parts of the world. But because Saturn is usually associated with the calcination, but so I've seen it at the bottom and at the top.
Yeah, you had one page, and I won't be able to flip to it and find it, but you had them in this order, and I went, oh my God, because moon down here is where we get menstrual in red. The menstruation, the red shift and the blue shift up here. Now, all the Egyptian pharaohs are old Irish Gaeilge names. The King Menes, the first pharaoh, comes from menstrual. That's where we get the word menstruation from. Yeah. King Menes is the blood. King Menes dug the river Nile. Newell is an Irish word for blood in the monthly period. So when David Icke's talking about the archons, we're locked in the Saturn moon matrix, I look at it like this. We are spirit incarnated into flesh down here for an experience, and this is the matrix we're locked in, is this. There's your Saturn moon matrix. Yeah. It's just spirit and physicality, and the archons are astrology. The 7, the sun, moon, and the 5 planets are what affect your astrology charts. They control you unless you learn what they're doing. But I thought you might like that. I mean, to me, I don't think there's machines on Saturn and the moon run by these interdimensional demons. I think the archons are the sun, moon, and the 5 planets. That affect us. That's my opinion anyway. But when I saw you had one page with them in this order, I thought, oh my God, man, this is like synchronized. So heavy.
One, is it that one?
That's a great one too. Yeah, but you had a page where they were written, but yeah,
and that has, I think actually that has the Saturn at the bottom and the moon at the top. Yeah, there's both, and this plays into the Saturn Moon matrix you're talking about. But yeah, it's like the limits of your yeah, the limits of reality or the limits of your soul. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, trapped in here. Yeah. So maybe we can then talk about the tria prima or tria prima.
yeah. Well, I think I just went through the trio prima, which is the salt, sulfur, and mercury. We talked about that already, didn't we? So we can move on to
Yeah.
the
So well,
gender.
because you've got the one, which is the monad.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the ether. Is the monad the ether? Do you think, or
Yeah, or the principle of oneness in general. So, the ether, it would correspond with the ether since there's only one ether, as it were, or, the creator or, the source or
right?
anything that's a whole or unity. I would say that's what the number one symbolizes and what the monad is all about. So it's like taking, like all the sort of symbolic correspondence you can get from just the number one. It's obviously a profound idea.
And the odd numbers are the male, right? The masculine.
Yeah. Odd numbers are masculine or of Adam, as it were, and even numbers are Eve.
Yeah, Adam. Well, I think of Adam and Eve. I think of tom tom and reverb.
Yeah.
Boom, right? Adam is the explosive force of hitting the tom tom, and Eve is the reverb.
Oh, that's spot on. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think of it like that.
Striking is a masculine process as well, but then receiving and holding the vibration is a feminine.
Yeah, the tom tom and the reverb. Adam and tom tom, Adam and reverb. Everb.
Reeve. Oh, there's a reeve verb. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, atom and everb. Yeah, you know what I mean. Reverb's got Eve in it and Adam. So I thought, like with the tria principa, so the next one, the one we didn't cover is the number two. We'll get into this later. We're going to go nerdy with people later for the musicians. We're going to talk about 4-3-2 hertz tuning. But if people have noticed, we've been talking about 4s, 3s, and now 2s in a bit.
Yeah.
But I noticed that the symbols for the 2 are the gender. Mm-hmm. They are the sun. That's by the way, for people watching, if you ever see a circle with a dot in it, that's the sign for the sun. Mm-hmm. And that's the glyph for the moon, obviously, or a really badly drawn banana. So out of the monad or the ether comes male and female. But you're saying the ether has male and female principle in it.
Well, yes, because I mean, if you break down the word, eth means two. And so there's like a two-ness just inherent in the name ether itself. So it's implying that there is some kind of polarity in ether. And if ether is the source of all the elements and all creation, then it must have a balance of masculine and feminine principles on the basis that, it takes a balance of masculine and feminine energies to produce anything, to create anything, That's
kind of funny because it's also in the word either. Which one do you want? Either or, either this one or that
either
one.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, you got either.
So you're splitting it in two, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the either.
There's so many things just light up with all this stuff. And
that's what's crazy is you just see the shit everywhere once you know it, Like I sent you that grilled cheese.
Yeah.
The
symbol for the stone and the grilled cheese, or the alchemy of the grilled cheese.
Yeah, I mean, I was just laughing. I had a circular plate as the monad. I had a square grilled cheese, which is the 4 principle. Cut it into 2 triangles, which had each of the 3 principles, and then there was 2 of them. And I was just looking down at it, going, "Look at that." I just made like an alchemical artwork on my plate with a grilled cheese.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That was crazy. Oh, another one I wanted to talk about. Oh, so so the 4 are the elements, the fire, earth, air, water. 3 are the salt, mercury, sulfur, which is physical. Water's the mercury's fluidity and sulfur's the soul. 2 is the gender, then the sun and the moon, or male, female, and the monad's the ether. Yeah. And that is what the 5 also represents, this pentagram that everyone's afraid of, all the Christians.
Yeah.
Why are they afraid of this symbol?
Well, I guess it's the inversion of the symbol, isn't it? I mean, the upright pentagram is all over the place, but it's when it's turned upside down and it looks like devil ears and a goatee beard. Everyone's like, ah! I'm like, just turn it to the side a little bit, and then it's fine.
Yeah, but it's funny because the goat is called Gad. That's Aries, the ram of God, the ram or lamb. That's your cerebrum. That's the goat.
Yeah. Top of the head. Yeah.
It's your goat. You know what I mean? So like it's the Baphomet with the goat head. It's talking about your top chakra and your cerebrum, where your pineal gland and all this is happening. It's just a symbol for the brain.
Yeah. It's like a really overt symbol that sort of, because in alchemy, there's one called the rebus, which is a symbol of the balance of masculine and feminine energies, but it's very overt, right? So it's like a two-headed human who has one female head and one male head, and on one side of the body they're holding like a feather for the air and a rock for the earth, and the other side they're holding like something for water, and so it's like it's done in a way so as to take the masculine and feminine symbols and put them all together into a single image. Now, I would say, like, what we're seeing in the world at the moment with all the tea stuff, is kind of like a distortion of that. It's like we're not meant to have one female head and one male head, and get like some woman's head like surgically attached to our neck or something like that in order to find the right balance. Right? That's totally not what it's about. But
it's funny, when you see the Baphomet figure that's Satan. He's pointing as above, so below with his hands. He's pointing at a moon and a sun. He's sitting in a lotus position for meditation. Yeah. He's got the Aries, the ram of God on his head, his brain, cerebrum, and he's got his stomach opened up with a caduceus.
Yeah.
With the two things coming through, talking about raising the quicksilver, the cerebrospinal fluid through meditation. It's not the devil. It's not, it's not a satanic symbol. It's a symbol for what we're talking about, for an internal physical alchemy to open up the brain and do all kinds of things like this. And I think that the churches, they purposely do this. They do not want people to find this science because you don't need them anymore. You know what I mean? You're like, I don't need you.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. It's sort of, that's what I found. It's like alchemy is like occulted and hated by both science and religion. So I'm like making absolutely no friends by getting into alchemy, right? It's like you're like it's like the religious people hate you and the science people hate you as well. But you're like, guys, but I love you both. I love science and religion. Come on, like let's just bring it together.
Which they are both. I mean, like once you understand this, and you can read the scriptures like science. But not like their science. This is not particle science. This is something else.
Yeah.
This is spiritual science, coming into physical. This is actually the marriage of the two. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Speaking of that, and then also the Freemasons, you talked about in your book, the circle is the whole, or the monad, I guess you could call it, or the ether actually, but the squaring of the circle and the compass, right? We hear that a lot. What is that? The squaring of the circle.
The squaring of the circle. Well, I mean, it's like a mathematical challenge, but because you have a circle, the area of the circle uses the number pi, which is this transcendental number, right? Not an exact number. It's always just going on forever kind of thing. But a square is usually an exact number of the area because it's a square number, and so there's this problem of how to take the area of a circle and fit it into a square, because you're essentially taking something that's transcendental and trying to fit it into something which is like exact. Of course, the circle is symbolic of like the universe, the heavens, like God, the one, the monad, all this kind of stuff. Whereas the square is symbolic of the elements and the earth and man. And is 4, obviously, the square is symbolic of the number 4 through the corners and the sides. And the triangle is symbolic of the number 3. So just to add to that, we were talking about earlier, because all the elements, even though there's 4 of them, they're symbolized by triangles. because they're showing you the principle, the tria prima, is more fundamental than the elements, right? It's just like 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's like that the elements are actually the 4 elements are encoded with a 3-sided symbol.
And that's the soul, spirit, and physical.
Yeah,
That's the Holy Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy
Trinity,
Spirit. All this is that.
Yeah. And this Trinity comes out in lots of different ways. And in the book, I relate it even to the electron, the proton, and the neutron, which I talk about as being very skeptical that those things even exist. I just say that they're names that have been made up, but they do correspond with the Holy Trinity, because you have the electron is a negative charge, which means an inflow of energy, which is feminine. You have the proton, which is a positive charge, which is an outflow of energy, which is masculine. And then you have the neutron, which is neither flowing in or out; it's neutral. That's your your neutral point, right? And that's your Mercury, if you like, the hermaphrodite. And then your proton is your sulfur, and your electron is your salt.
Is your salt, yeah. And so also, like, the squaring of the circle, you could say it's the unity of 2 geometric genders of the line in the circle. Or again, if you could call the circle the evens and the odds. Again, you can't divide the evens into the odds, which is why the pi comes out to point blah, 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 because they don't divide equally into each other.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? And then that starts syncretizing there too. Or you could call it the unity of like energetic opposites almost, or
I call it the geometric genders, because they're obviously, the line and the curve, the line is masculine, the curve is feminine, right? That's like the essential character of our, like, the masculine body and the feminine body, right? One's more straight, one's more curved, etc. So
my pronouns are oval and trapezoid.
And the curve as well is actually, a curve by itself is a symbol of a cup, right? It's also a symbol of the moon.
The moon, there you go. Yeah.
For a vessel.
And that's also, that's the receptive, that's the phallus, and the
receptive principle. So
we talked before, so you're talking protons, electrons, and neutrons. Mm-hmm. Now, again, to remind everybody, you have a PhD in theoretical physics, atomic particles, right? David Parker, our good friend, as I talked to you off screen, he's a retired electrical engineer, and he wanted me to ask you, he said, electrons, they base all of their theoretical, and he admits they don't know what an electron is.
Yeah.
But everything we're talking on right now, all these electronics that we're talking on are based on practical application of theoretical electrons, even though he doesn't know what they are. Yeah. And so we were talking about this. What do you think? We think it's semantics, right? It's another name for what do you think really protons, electrons, and neutrons are, if they're not protons, electrons, and neutrons? If they're not little, I don't even know what the hell they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just fire, like elementally fire or light or heat, pressure waves or heat waves, we talk about pressure waves in, when you have a current running through a wire, it's got a frequency, doesn't it? So it's an oscillating sort of heat source. Metals are conductors of heat, but as we're told that they're conductors of heat and electricity, as if it's 2 different things. But in my experience, it's the same bloody thing, right? It conducts fire. I would challenge I would say that, the theory obviously works because the electronics work. But I would say that the theory is not conditional on the belief that there is these quantized particles called electrons jumping through the wires and, going across the coils and everything. I think that's just a model, it's just a model, a thought of what's going on at the smallest scale. But
right.
I would certainly challenge the principles on which those thoughts and assumptions are based, and all the experiments that are supposed to prove that that's real. I would challenge them. Yeah. But
you do in part 1 of your book, you absolutely challenge them on this, and you're the guy who can do it. Because you
Yeah.
did sit and study quantum physics and all this shit, right? I mean, you know this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, dude, I looked for ages to try and find, like, is there anyone really working with, particles in a real way? I know they're talk about particles. I know they have equations and models and everything, but is anyone actually working in a hands-on way where I could say, I'm absolutely 100% sure that they're dealing with these little balls of hard matter? And I've never found any, but it's obviously the book is I'm taking a position, but anyone is free to come forward and say, hey, look, by the way, we we are working with atoms and molecules here. Look, here's the proof, and then I'd have to like humbly, step forward and say, you know what, I was wrong. Shit, I didn't know about that. They really are electrons, and I'll rethink my position, but. As it stands at the moment, no, I'm completely certain there's no such thing as electrons, protons, and
You kind of skirted this one in the book. You didn't. You can decline to answer. You can plead, as we call it in America, the Fifth Amendment.
yeah.
Atomic bomb bullshit.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Or just
Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Is that like napalm, or did they drop
oh,
a bomb with a giant mushroom cloud that wiped everything out, or is that? Do you
oh
think?
yeah, no, I didn't go that far. I mean, like
Oh,
I'm not questioning the events. I'm just questioning whether it's appropriate to call the bomb nuclear, to actually use the word nuclear in front of the word bomb, or is it just a bomb? You
but do
know,
you think the bomb is really real and that big? And do you think that was a real bomb, or do you think they've used TV fakery to make it look like one and piled up a shit truck ton of dynamite or dropped napalm and then
yeah, I haven't gone as far as to say it didn't happen. I mean, I'm not really in a position to say that, but I was just trying to show that you can make big fucking bombs. If they just called them BFBs, that's fine. But when they call it nuclear or atomic, there's a suggestion that the bomb is actually tapping into a new power source that normal people can't tap into, and it's unleashing this like quantum like energy from the 10 to the 15th like atometer scale of reality, right? It's a very specific thing to say that the bomb is nuclear or the bomb is atomic, and I challenge the use of those words in describing the bomb. And yeah, there's other people, I forget the guy's name, but a guy did a whole study on it and claimed that it was mustard gas and napalm that they used.
yeah,
But they
because it's very important because the idea is that I'm not I'm not in your I don't know, but the idea is you've got this shit wrapped in all this stuff, and somehow you can bounce these two little fucking atoms or whatever off each other, and they bounce back in, and a thing the size of like the tip of a flea's leg blows up Hiroshima. I'm sorry, man. To me, it's like saying you could throw a match into the library and burn down America, or like a city. Like it just, I'm like, I know there's a lot of energy in the middle, but like to me, it just doesn't sound plausible.
Yeah, the chain reaction.
Yeah,
Chain reaction. Well, chain reaction is just a fancy word for burning, right? That's actually what
right.
burning is the chain reaction, right? It's like
Yeah.
one thing goes on fire, sets the next thing on fire. It's like, and the next thing, and so on. It's just burning.
But doesn't burning need oxygen, air?
Uh, yeah. Well, but they have
So
air.
how
Right?
the fuck is it locked in the middle of a metal ball with no air, and then it just burns down a city?
Yeah, I'm just not buying it, and just like the way nuclear is used, just to scare people. Like every week on the news, it's like, they're risking nuclear war, or they're risking a nuclear war. We're gonna blow the world. It's like that whole thing of like the whole world could be destroyed at any moment by one psychopath pushing a button. It's just a very powerful sort of fear mongering like spell, and it's like it really needs to be broken down. Like, is nuclear power a real thing, or are they just making big fucking bombs and calling them nuclear?
That's why it's so important, because they're doing it right now. They're like, well, this is dangerous. What's going on with Russia? And this could lead to a nuclear strike and war, and it's scaring the hell. And it gives them carte blanche. Iran's going to get the bomb, and we need to go in and wipe out a whole country, and we'll just put a new bank in while we're in there too, because they could get the bomb. And you're like, dude, show me the bomb, mate. Like, because the footage we see, you've seen it before, where the house blows up, but the camera filming it is just sitting there perfectly. The film doesn't melt,
Yeah.
doesn't move. The box the camera's in doesn't move, but the house blows down the street and the
Yeah.
film doesn't melt, even though it's supposed to be like so hot it just blew off the
Yeah.
siding off a building, and the trees don't even, the leaves don't fall off the trees. To
Yeah.
me, it looks like they use little models and just were like overlaying film, but I don't know. I can't say.
Yeah, it seems that way. It's so old, the footage, and yeah, it does look like all like studio footage, and I think a lot of people have kind of exposed that stuff now. And there was the guy Galen Windsor as well, who
Yeah, he was swimming in the pools with the nuclear pools at General Electrics. Remember, he was eating that shit at lectures.
eating uranium. Yeah,
He put the Geiger counters like, he's like, this is enough where the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, would clear out a 12-mile radius around San Francisco right now. And he's like, he just starts eating it. And he lived like 85.
Yeah, his story is really interesting, and because he was like basically in charge of nuclear fuels for America, right? He was like the top guy for their nuclear fuel inventory. So he was working hands on with uranium all the time, and all his staff were, and he actually was like really liked his job. They were doing great work. Everyone was happy. Like they take the uranium and break it up and get the plutonium out of it and stuff. All by hand, no problems at all. Like say drinking water from the nuclear pool and all this.
He said they were swimming in those pools because they were warm.
He's like, this is great. It's like glowing blue, It's just like, yeah. And but then he said something changed, right? And all these like heavy-handed government rules and regulations came in and said, oh, you can't be handling this stuff anymore. You can't touch it. You're only allowed 10 minutes of exposure per day and everything. He's like, this is going to completely ruin our whole operation here. We can't do this. I can't only have 10 minutes exposure a day. But they came down super heavy-handed safety regulations, and it was all about, I think, and well, what he was saying as well, is it's all about hiding that source of power, which was what I called radiant materials, right? Like materials that actually like glow and give off a sustained heat and light for a long period of time, like radium. Uranium, it does that as well. And uranium is like very similar to lead. It's found in the same ore as lead, and this, it's basically heavy lead. And they actually say in physics that uranium decays into lead. So like after uranium is finished, being radioactive, it becomes lead. So it's actually just kind of like a kind of heavy lead or a kind of charged lead, which is able to release energy over a long period of time, just like how a bell, when struck, releases sound for a long period of time, right? So they're materials that are able to hold fire and release it over a long period of time. And that is the real nuclear material, right? It's not nuclear. That's not even the right word for it, but that's what they're trying to hide with nuclear.
Well, Windsor was saying the same. He's like, it's radiation. It either burns you or it doesn't. It's fire. Yeah. It's like that's why he's holding uranium. The Geiger counter is going off, but he's like, it's not burning my skin.
Yeah.
But yet, even Walter Russell, who was way out there, he wrote Atomic Suicide, saying how it was crazy to bring this shit out from under the ground. But is it?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he had it wrong too. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've never handled these materials myself, but there's a lot of stuff from like the turn of the century. I mean, I think from like early 1900s through to about the 1930s, maybe even later, a little bit after the war. This stuff was available and it was marketed. And a famous example is the pacemakers. They were selling pacemakers in the 60s. They had a battery that lasted for 88 years. It was made by, radium. It's like they're going to implant it in the middle of your chest to keep you alive. I mean, if it was deadly, it would make no sense to implant it in someone's chest to keep them alive, right? Total crazy. Yeah. People using them to heat their homes. And of course, what they call nuclear submarines, right? That's what they have as well. They have these batteries, these power sources that last for absolutely ages. And the whole nuclear thing is really like a scare tactic to distract us from ever knowing about these powerful materials.
I saw a documentary with this old couple who's been living in Chernobyl ever since the meltdown, and they got plants growing. There's animals and wildlife running around, and the people who came in to make the documentary, they have their Geiger counters and like, they are going off. There's still radiation there, but they got we got our radiation badges, and this old couple's been living in there forever. If I were in Ukraine right now, I'd get my ass into Chernobyl too, because no one's going to come in there if the war breaks out because they're all scared of it. I'd be in there next to them. I just think it's all bullshit, to be honest with you, but I don't know.
Well, apparently there's like monster growth around Chernobyl, big, things are big and stuff, and which would sort of make sense if the whole area was like sort of infused with fire, essentially radiation, light energy into the materials, and then that's, feeds the plants, and then they're like huge, they're like bouncing back, but if they were actually being like eroded by, particles that are like breaking apart the atoms and stuff like that, that's not what you would see. You would see mutations and degradation and deformities and all this kind of stuff. But what you actually see is just life bouncing back like hell yeah, like after a forest fire, right? It's like the earth has gotten a new lease of life from all the fire, and a new energy for growth.
Well, that's interesting too. Yeah, exactly. I look at, like, when you look at fruits, which are electric foods, well, they're up in the trees in the sun.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting electric, they're getting heat, like electric and wind, male. And then you look at vegetables, which when you plant seeds, they germinate when the moon's full. The farmers know to plant seeds at the full moon, the harvest moon, or they plant there, and they're growing under the soil, which is the earth, the feminine principle. And vegetables are what you use to rebuild the body. So if you need electric food or you need to cleanse the body, you eat a fruit diet, you go on a fruit fast. If you need to rebuild the body, you eat vegetables, and then the meat comes with both. So again, you can, this knowledge goes, this goes in, this is the knowledge. This is it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because I was thinking about that as well, because fruit corresponds with the air element, right? And like you say, because it's usually high up in the air, you usually have to reach up for fruit, right? But you reach down for vegetables, down to the earth. And most vegetables are, well, they grow either in the earth or on the earth. Most fruits are higher up. And you were saying about the electricity as well. So, because there's a potential difference between the ground and the air, right? It's like you have, the higher something is, the more of a voltage there is between.
Oh yeah, it's like 70 or 100 volts per meter or something. I can't remember what. I think it's 70 or 100 volts per meter. Again, yeah, that's why they have these towers way up there with the antenna up there, because by the time it gets up there, you're looking at massive voltage, coming across. Yeah. I didn't even think of that either.
Yeah. So the fruit's got the electric correspondence there as well, and and you got the different tastes as well. I'll talk about this in the book. So the air corresponds with sweetness. Fruit, obviously, sweetness, like sweet essences. So if you think of the distillation, it's the most subtle essences rise up the most and like make it into the fruits. So the fruits have all like the subtle sweet essences, whereas vegetables are associated with bitterness because they're generally less ready to eat, more bitter tasting and more earthy than fruit, which is all is just like ready as it is, like fits in the hand perfectly, just is great, so there's like in a way you have to do more alchemy with vegetables. You have to skin them or chop them up or cook them or prepare them in some way to be consumed, but the fruit is just like right there, like ready to go.
Well, I was just going to say it's almost like the fruit reminds me of it's fermentation. The fruit ferments, you've seen the videos where the elephants wait till these apples or there's these trees that drop the rotten fruit and they ferment. And then these elephants come and get wasted on them once a year at that season, at the end of fall when it drops down, they come and get drunk off these apples and shit. It's like the tree is doing the fermentation, distillation, and coagulation almost.
Yeah.
And the fruits are up there on top of the tree, which is the oak keg where your whiskey's sitting at, you know what I mean? It's like, it's almost like the fruit's gone through the last 3 steps and the vegetables haven't.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's smart. Yeah. Great stuff. Yeah, there's just always so much more to together. It's fantastic, man.
Yeah, we were going to do 432, but I don't think we want to. I don't know if we want to get into like toroidal field mechanics and shit, But
Yeah, no,
um,
that's
what
fine. I mean,
about the mouth, though? You talk about like maybe we could quickly.
well,
It's also interesting, most of the like a toroidal field, it's coming in from the top and expelled through the bottom.
Mhm,
And tell us about that. Right? You see, hear, smell, taste.
mhm.
That's four of them through the top of your toroidal field of your body, and then
Yeah.
you
So,
piss and poo and ejaculate through the bottom.
yeah, yeah.
Compression,
Well, yeah, there's
compression,
a general
convergence.
energy flow. Yeah, you put things in the mouth or you put things in the head, even, your experiences, you listen through your ears, you see through your eyes, you smell through your nose, you taste through your mouth. It's like energy is coming in through the head. And, someone said to me a while ago, a lady that I know said that, everything is basically a mouth. And all things are basically experience or food for the mouth. So everything up here is sort of receptive in a way. We have the five elements corresponding with the senses. So the eyes perceive fire or light. The nose perceives air, or or smell. The mouth is water. It's a water sense. You're tasting the water, like, because I mean, even if you eat something dry, you need the saliva. It needs to dissolve in the saliva for you to actually taste it. So you're kind of tasting the water. And then touch is an earth sense because you feel the earth. Earth is dry and hard, right? And that's your touch. And then you have your ears, which correspond with the ether, because although people often think the ears correspond with the air because you hear the sound, but actually the ears work in water and in earth as well, right? It's like
Oh yeah, you can hear underwater.
you're underwater and under earth. Even if you had solid earth in your ears, you would still hear the vibrations in that earth, right? It's like because the vibration
Right.
travels through. So
Yeah, you can put your ear also down to the railroad track to hear if the train's coming a mile down.
yeah, yeah.
And the ears in the word ether, it's earther. It's in there in the
The
anagram.
ear, yeah, it's an anagram of the ear. So like
Oh, it is. Yeah, the ear is ether.
yeah. Yeah, so ether corresponds with the air like really nicely and really elegantly. It's like the hearing is like the sort of the ultimate sense. It's like got the highest bandwidth of frequencies. The others like have a narrow, like there's only one octave of bandwidth in your eyes, right, for the color spectrum, but your ears are able to perceive, I think, 10 octaves or something like this.
Well, it's funny because I put the sixth sense, as you call it, ESP or intuition or whatever. I call that the ether because it's there's in the ether there's no distance. It's not like a sound. I put it like a tug of war. You're sitting in Scotland and I'm sitting up in Copenhagen, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we had a rope from you to me
Mm-hmm.
going around 65 miles a curve, but that's none of my business. But let's say we're on a flat, non-rotating Earth and we have a tug of war rope, and I pull right now, no matter how far I am from you, you will pull at the same time. There won't be a delay in me pulling the rope, even though you're in Scotland and I'm in Copenhagen, far away. To me, I look at the ether like that metaphorically. I'm not saying there's ropes everywhere, but I'm saying imagine it's a giant rope. And so shit's instantaneous. Well, that gives you your sixth sense.
Mm-hmm.
Intuition, ESP, right? That would be ether. That would be the fifth element, the quintessence. They call it quintessence because quinta means five.
Yes. Yeah.
So ether is I think even Einstein, he did admit the ether later, didn't he? Or I think Brendan Murphy was saying later he did admit that it had to be there or something like it.
Yeah, that rings a bell. I'm not sure exactly what he said, but yeah, I think there was some conceding to ether that came later in his life, from what I remember. But yeah, so the ether. Oh, what was I going to say about it? I lost my train of thought there. Totally. We were going to talk about the two, weren't we? The sun and the moon. You want to go to the two?
Oh yeah, or we were going to go into the toroidal field actually, if you want to do that, the cosmic vortex.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's what I was saying to David Parker. I can hold up some visuals in your book, but When he was saying, well, what is this electron? I was saying, well, to me, it was the larger, like the ether is the mind of God or the monad, or the source of mind. Pretty much, you could call it that. The ancients used to say all is mind, and when God or mind or ether wants to create, it makes a pressure differential in a geographic location in the ether, and you get a vortex or like a little tornado.
Yeah.
But the way a vortex works is there's a large hole at the opening, like a female's giant with a giant vagine the size of a wizard's sleeve, as Borat said, right? But to make the pressure differential, it needs the opposing male, and then it starts coming through the middle. But in the middle of a whirlpool, there's not water. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's your ether or whatever. But so to me, the electron is just the starting of the movement of the vortex. The energy, it goes down and then it comes up around the side. I can show you.
Yeah.
Can you? I probably explain it like a retard because I am. But which one of these would you rather see?
Yeah. So I mean, if you take like the water whirlpool, thing,
that one.
Vortex. So yeah, a number of things interesting about this. So it is like the fundamental dynamic pattern that's behind everything, and it's even in mainstream physics. It's talked about, like say the electron is said to have a toroidal field around it, atoms, molecules, the human heart, even like planet Earth, that big ball flowing through space that everyone talks about. that's supposed to have a magnetic field vortex around it as well, and copper coils and pyramids and all sorts. So there's this vortex field, this toroid field, which is in everything, and it's actually kind of hidden. It's not hidden, but not enough significance is attributed to it in physics. I would say it's like talked about, but it's talked about as a secondary phenomenon. So, like in that picture there of the planet Earth, they would say that the magnetic field is generated by the spinning planet, and they say the same about the electron. So they know that fire or light responds to magnets, and they say this because the electron is spinning, and by the spinning charge produces a toroidal magnetic field around it. Now, what I would say is it's the other way around, like you described. There's no electron generating the vortex. The vortex is being generated by the ether, like you said, by the pressure differentials, and that's where the dynamic system is like happening in the substance of the ether itself. But I would reject the idea that there's a material particle which is spinning to generate the vortex field.
Right. They're saying the particles flying, they don't explain how they're doing it.
Yeah.
They're saying the proton and the electron are orbiting around this whatever is supposed to be in the middle, and that's causing the spin. And you're proposing no, the spin is the ether, it's the pressure differential. And when mind collapses, when that's done, that collapses the vortex and it goes away like that, pretty much, right? I mean, I found this one very good too. I think Jesus said, I am the Alpha and Omega.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, the Alpha, and I think I didn't even realize that till literally writing the last chapter. I noticed the big Alpha. I'm like, well, that's the phallus. And then I'm like, hold on, the little Alpha's the sperm. And then the Omega is the womb, the breasts. Amazing. And then so the symbol for phi is the line and the circle overlapped, which again are the two geometric genders. And not to get too naughty, but it's also a representation of the copulation process, right?
Right.
Sort of telling you that that's the root of creation. Is this union of masculine and feminine energies in the various forms in which they take.
Yeah, I would say that is what's satanic about the whole transgender agenda. Is they're taking away, this is totally essential knowledge. Yeah. And if they're creating lost souls who don't know what they are and where they came from, and so they have no power, they're powerless. And that's why they're crying out all the time like little babies.
Yeah.
because people who have real power don't cry out like babies. They help themselves. They
Yeah.
don't play victim. But this one I like too, because you can see your mouth, ears, all your sustenance comes in through your air, comes in through your nose or your mouth, depending on how you breathe. Your food's coming in there, your eyes, your ears, to everything that's telling you what's going around, except for your fingers, are coming in,
Yeah.
converging, and then all the divergence is coming out where you urinate or ejaculate or feet. I don't know what you call it, poo.
Yeah, well, that's it. So all the earth and water, the earth and water moves down. So that's like
Get down.
pooing your pee, right? Comes down, but your fire in the air goes up. So your breath and the heat, most of your heat comes out the top of your head, right? And
Oh, right. Yeah, your exhalation is hot. Your breath's hot. Oh, yeah. I
the
didn't think
air and
that.
the fire is coming out the top, and the water and the earth it's falling down and coming out the bottom of the body. But yeah, we can actually create a vortex using a magnetic stirrer. I don't know if you have one of those, but they're super cool.
I don't know what it is. Can you explain? I didn't get what that
Yeah,
meant.
it's like a little magnet. It looks like a pill, like a capsule, and on a magnetic plate, and you put your drink in, and you put the magnet in the drink, and then you turn it on. It spins the magnet, and then that creates a vortex, and it's great for mixing stuff. Chemists use it a lot, for mixing things over a long period. So when you do that, when you turn it on, the first thing you notice is this like dimple starts to spin and form in the water, and then it starts moving down towards the bottom to create the vortex. What struck me when I first got it was like how the sound of the vortex, it sounds like a throat. It sounds like gargling your toothpaste, right? I realized that's because the vortex has a throat. Yeah, the vortex is a mouth. Like our mouth is the top of the vortex, our throat is the body of the vortex, and our anus is the bottom of the vortex, right, where things get squeezed out. And it's just it all comes together because when you look at the vortex as well, the top is quite stable, but the bottom, if it whips around, it's like it's moving around like a snake, or like a snake's tail or something, right? It's like the bottom of the vortex is wily, and this is our lower animal nature. We have this lower fleshly animal nature that's responsive to like every like urge and like everything that's happening. But we have this higher like mental nature that's more stable and able to bring the lower nature like under control, right? And this gets into the whole alchemy of it as well. So yeah, the vortex actually combines the above and the below, the masculine and the feminine, and even like all the different views of the cosmos, the globe earth and the flat earth, like both of them have a vortex. Yeah, both of them. Yeah. So the vortex is really the great unifying principle that unites all points of view and all sort of paradoxes. Hey Steve, I
Yeah,
think I lost your audio there.
that makes sense, man. And also, your mouth is bigger than your anus, hopefully.
Yeah, for some people, yeah.
depends, depends on what you're sitting on. But also your nostrils too. The other exhalation, your nostrils are tiny as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I was gonna. Well, let's get into. I'll tell you what. We won't get into 432 and all that kind of stuff too. I think maybe we could do this again if you want to do one just on music. Actually, like I had a Skype chat with Mike Wilkerson and Alex Michael, conspiracy music guru, and we were just playing around with the backgrounds in Skype where it can make like you're all sitting at a bar. All six guests are like can have a different scene, and it just kind of draws you in. And we were talking about maybe just sitting around having drinks and stuff, like keep it chillax.
Yeah.
And getting people like you and Eileen McCusack, tone nerds, musos and tone nerds, and getting into that. I did want to read you this though, because real quickly, so what is the lore of the Philosopher's Stone? We can get into the tone, but I don't think we should go like nuts. What is the mainstream it's an allegory, you think? What are we told that they were what is it?
So it's just a substance that is supposed to have certain properties, such as the ability to change lead into gold, right? So it's able to, it's a purifying substance. that's able to kind of lift things up to their highest, purest expression. So one example would be turning lead into gold. Another example would be like your health. So actually, like what they call the elixir of life, which would be a tincture or a solution made with the Philosopher's Stone, which would be taken as a medicine, and would, I mean, people talk about immortality and stuff, but it's like soft immortality, right? It's like, you obviously you can still get like, blown up by a big fucking bomb, right? But it's kind of like, gives you like what's the word I'm looking for? Longevity, yeah. Longevity, good health, and resistance to sickness and all this kind of thing. And there's another part as well. It's also said to confer like sort of spiritual enlightenment, like bring you closer to God and all this kind of thing. So it's, it sounds fantastical, and it's treated that way. We're told it's just a mythical thing, just an allegory, and it is symbolic, but I don't think it's only symbolic. I think it's a great secret, and in fact, it's called the Philosopher's Stone for a reason, because it's only philosophers who can figure out what it is, right? And this is it's a strange thing because it's not the alchemist's stone, right? And it's not the magician's stone, and it's not the musician's stone, right? It's the philosopher's stone, and yeah, there seems to be a very specific reason for that, right? Because philosophy is about love of wisdom, and all this stuff we're talking about, like the scriptures and the alchemy and everything, like what we're really looking at and looking for is wisdom. I mean, I read the Bible, but I'm not, I don't go to church. I'm not a Christian. I don't subscribe to one particular Christian religion or anything. I read the Bible looking for wisdom. You know what I mean? I'm just looking for the wisdom, man. Like that's it. I read anything with that view for extracting the wisdom contained therein, and anyway, so philosophy is about wisdom. The Philosopher's Stone is, I think, about wisdom, and it's a secret that's locked. It's in such a way, like occultism, like so only the right kind of person can see it. It's that kind of a thing. So nobody really just comes out and tells you exactly what it is, but they will write books all about it, talking around it as much as they can, right? It's called circumlocution, which is talking around something in such a way that if the reader has the right heart, they will see what you're pointing towards, but if they have the wrong heart, they won't have a clue what you're talking about, right? And so that's how, so the stone is a secret.
Well, I'm going to read, and I'm actually, I've shown you this book here. I don't know if you've ever seen, I'm kind of famous for these
I know the book,
talks.
but I've got it, but I have not read through it all.
I was going to buy it and send you a copy. Okay, so I'm known for these cell salt talks, which are the key to purifying the blood and the body through the mineral cell salts, which you said are preservation, salvation. And you can theoretically you're immortal, unless, like you said, you get hit by a bus. But this is Dr. George Washington Carey, very big occultist under Taurus, which is a fixed earth. We didn't even get into all that, but you know all that, right? Taurus is the fixed earth, and that's your cerebellum. That's your action. So your Ram of God or Lamb of God, who takes away the sins or deficiencies of the world. When you are mineral efficient, your brain doesn't malfunction, and the rest of your body continues to make corpuscles if you don't ejaculate them out the bottom, and then you only have so many. So once they're gone, you have food only, and then you're dead.
Yeah.
He said, air is the raw material for blood. Now, blood is water, right? Let's go alchemy. Air touches the sacred water, right? So we've got the masculine air touching the water. And when it is drawn in, or breathed in, rather, inhalation, the breath of God, by the infinite alchemist, you and me, right? To the blood vessels, it unites with the Philosopher's Stone, the mineral cell salts, the 12 salts. And in the human laboratory, that creates blood.
Oh, man, that makes sense.
Once you're done with blood, you're dead, right? Go cut your wrist and see how long you make it, right? Now, under Cancer, which is the mother sign, that's the cardinal water, and she's considered the mother womb.
Mhm.
Um, so Cancer is your elastic fibers plus other things. I won't get into it. For people who have seen me, they've seen me talking about this fucking thing for years and years and years. But there's a Cancer down there. She's your elastic tissues. And when they dry up from oil and water, you're dead too. That's why a corpse gets rigor mortis, because it's all the fluids are gone. When elastic fiber is deficient in tissue of the membrane between the upper and lower brain poles, the cerebrum, Abraham, Brahma, the Lamb of God, and the cerebellum, Taurus, there results a sagging apart of the positive and negative poles of the dynamo that runs the machinery of man.
Mhm.
And when we know that a deficiency in the cell salts of the blood causes the symptoms that medical ignorance has dignified and personified with Latin names that nobody knows the meaning of, we will know how to heal scientifically by the unalterable law of the chemistry of life, or alchemistry of life. When we learn the cause of disease, then and not before will we prevent disease and death. Not through quarantine, not through disinfectants, nor through boards of health will man reach the long sought plane of health. Not through affirmations of health, nor denials of disease will bodily regeneration be wrought. Regeneration, bodily regeneration, nor by dieting or fasting or Fletcherizing or suggesting will the elixir of life and the philosopher's stone be found.
Mm. That's wonderful.
The
Yeah.
mercury of the sages and the hidden manna are not constituents of health foods. They are air and the blood and the mineral salts.
Yeah.
That's what they think the philosopher's stone is.
Yeah, dude, I think they're really onto something there. It's well, yeah, I mean, maybe they use some occultism and misdirection, as I say, to get people who are maybe not on the right path or shouldn't have the knowledge to sort of lead them astray. So you get things which sort of suggest that the Philosopher's Stone is this like rare rock that's way down like a mile underground or something. You got to go and start digging a hole, like looking for some like sacred stone or whatever. But actually, it's something that's much closer to home, right? As you're alluding to there.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, Jesus says, "On you, Peter, stone, mineral, I build my church
Yeah.
of everlasting life. Those who believe in me shall have everlasting life." They're not talking about a dude. They're talking about this, I think.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting. Their take is biochemical, the alchemical marriage of spirit into man and blood. And we won't get into that this time. I was going to get into ancient Ireland and this science. We could do another one if you ever want to, man. I'd love to.
And I love chatting to you, and I would love to do the tone, the frequency one. And I think, yeah, you're right. It does deserve a whole thing to itself. And I would love as well, like you say, like Alex, Michael, and Eileen, and just other people who've worked with these frequencies to like share their stories, because the stuff you've told me in private is amazing, and I've got all my own stories working with 432 for over 10 years now. So yeah, I think there's a lot there, and there is a lot of people who would be interested in that. It's the same, maybe more in the muso camp, but it's a great topic as well. So yeah, I'd love to chat some more, Steve. But yeah, I don't even know how much time it's been. What is it, 2 hours or something? 2.5
Yeah,
hours.
exactly. We're gonna lose people, and it's been almost 2.5 hours. So, but I think this has been an awesome talk, and it's a pleasure to meet you, man. I'm not far from you. We're about an hour flight from each other, so
Yeah.
maybe I got to take an ox to get to your town from Edinburgh. I don't know if there's a real airport anywhere near you.
Not too far from Edinburgh, yeah. But yeah, no, hopefully we get to meet up soon. And we talked earlier, there might be a chance to do that later this summer. So I'll follow up on that as well.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But anyway, for people listening, if you like this conversation, we haven't even touched the surface. So buy Steve's book, A Fool's Wisdom, and I can tell you he's no fucking fool. And I love the humor. Well, man, you know what? What's really nice is there's a lot of humility in this book. but there's a lot of I like really dry, sarcastic. It's not dry. It's actually it's pretty gritty, but there's a lot of humor, and you also write the way I like. It's not hard. This is the first alchemy book I've read where it's just in plain English. It's right there, just as we've just kind of described it. You don't have, it's demystified. I think you did an awesome job of demystifying it. And can you tell people where to get this? If they want it?
Yeah, sure. So it's available on Amazon, and I also sell it direct through my website, stephenyoung.uk. You can buy it from me directly, and I'll write you a little handwritten note and send it to you, signed, of course. So those are the options, basically.
Brilliant, Steve. Thanks so much. Yeah, we'll definitely do it again. We'll talk to do you know Eileen? You've known her a while, haven't you? Or
yes, we've met a few times, and yeah, talked online a bunch. And I haven't met Alex Michael yet, though, but I've been enjoying his music for quite a few years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Wilkerson lives right by him too. I was just in Spain in April making a song with them too. So Wilkerson's a Wilkie, I call him.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, we had a great chat as well recently. So
I saw that. That was great. Yeah, that's why I didn't want to talk about the first part of the book. I know everybody, you've been talking about that shit. I wanted to get to this side.
No, that's it. And then all that first part of the book is stuff that you've been doing for years. You're way further down the road with all that than I am. But yeah, I had to address all that, before I could really tackle alchemy. I had to, just address all the big theories in modern science. But I've done it now, so onward.
I was honored. We had a Spacebusters footnote in there too, and I was like, maybe he meant Globebusters, but
yeah,
it mean us. I was like, this guy's been watching my stuff. Cool, man.
yeah. Credit where it's due. Like you guys were way out ahead of the curve, and taking all the risk to bring us the obvious truth.
Seemed like it. We'll see. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Anyway, Steve, great chat, man. Yeah, let's definitely set up this next thing and do it again. And thanks so much for taking the time. And it's an honor to meet you. I feel like we've known each other forever.
Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, brother.
Bye.